The Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors: EliteForm.com, IgnitionAPG.com, PlayUSA at PLAEUSA.com, and Sorinex Exercise Equipment at Sorinex.com. And now, the Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast. Welcome to Iron Game Chalk Talk with your host, Ron McKeefery.
Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Everything you got!
On this podcast, hear Coach McKeefery straight talk about training, featuring the top strength and conditioning professionals from around the world. And now, here's your host, Ron McKeefery.
Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 104. Iron Game Chalk Talk is a weekly podcast where I bring you experts in the field to talk shop. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes or YouTube or join the mailing list at ronmckeefery.com to stay up to date with the latest guests and anything else that I have going on. This week, excited to have Erik Korem with us. Erik is the high performance coach at University of Kentucky. Known him for quite some time, followed his path, and really has a great, unique setup there at UK. They're really doing some fantastic stuff, really following the high-performance manager route that we've talked about quite a bit on the show, and really having a tremendous impact as a former strength coach, still strength coach, but leading the high-performance realm there at UK. So we get into it. We talk about his journey and how he's kind of been in and out of a lot of different things, and all those things combined have kind of helped create this and this respect and this position there at Kentucky. We talk about his original motivation for going overseas to kind of get and understand this model better. We talk about some things that you can do on a poor man's budget if you don't have a lot of the tools that some people, it's one of the biggest misconceptions that you can't be doing some of these things because you don't have the expensive technology. Well, I mean, questionnaires and just verbal questionnaires can give you a lot of information as long as you track it, and so we get into a lot of great stuff, and I know you're going to get a ton out of this episode. Before we do, I want to make sure we recognize all our sponsors. We got Sorinex.com, PlayUSA.com, IgnitionAPG.com, and of course, EliteForm. We're all just getting back from the conference. You would have saw Skip and the gang out there at EliteForm. And, guys, these guys are just fantastic people, number one. I can't say enough about them and the type of company they are and what they've been doing from the get-go to try to advance our field. And when we talk about in an episode like this with Erik Korem, where we're talking about technology and being able to seamlessly integrate that into your program, this by far is one of the best ways to do it. You put the camera up, put the pad up, and you forget about it essentially, and it's just a great tool. So if you're in the market for these things, reach out to Skip. Just have a conversation, and see how they can present things to you. Again, it's not what I like about them most is that they're not going to try to they know who their target demographic is. They know what it's all about. So, they're not going to try to oversell you or anything like that. They really just want to provide a resource. They think it's a great resource. I agree. And you will too if you get really dive into it. So if not, go to their Twitter page and follow them, elite_form on Twitter, and just stay up to date with what they got going on, because there's some really, some of the stuff that they're implementing in Philadelphia Eagles. They're always putting things up about them and other programs, and it's just really neat to see what other people are doing with technology and trying to stay on the cutting edge with that. So check out EliteForm. Again, reach out, tell them thanks for being a part of the show, and I'd appreciate that. Lastly, Strength Coach Basic Training. I get lots of questions about Strength Coach Basic Training. I get lots of people requesting to join the group. This is a paid group. It does require some time and some administrative type things that go behind the scenes, but it really is very cheap, and it really is there for the young strength coach, just getting started in the field, really needing to learn about the profession and how to kind of chase the strength and conditioning profession. But there's 8 lectures and assignments and projects. It's the same assignments and projects that our interns go through at Eastern. We put them through it. So you'll go through the exact same thing. A lot of times we'll throw up videos of the things that we're going and doing with our current interns. But then you're also, you've got a built-in community of over 160 members now that are all in the same spot, a relatively same spot, that are all communicating back and forth and congratulating one another. We just had Noah here, just got his first job. Everybody's congratulating them and supportive, and it's just a really cool experience that way. And so if you're in a position where you're not able to do an internship, or maybe you're not getting out of your internship experience what you're wanting, the product's really created for you. And like I said, I try to keep it as relatively cheap. None of these things do I get rich on, I promise you. They're really just there to try to be a resource for coaches. So make sure you check that out, strengthcoachbasictraining.com. And I know you get a ton out of it. So sit back, enjoy this episode. Erik does a fantastic job, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, guys, welcome back. Excited to have Erik Korem with us. Erik is the director's, what is your title there at Kentucky now? I don't even know.
High performance coach.
High performance coach at Kentucky is a great guy, a guy I've known for a lot of years, going all the way back to his Mississippi State days, and just done a fantastic job everywhere he's been. So, man, I appreciate you coming on the show and spending a little time with us, brother.
I'm glad to be here.
Hey, Erik, kind of go into that, because I mean, we go way back to when you were an assistant at Mississippi State or Ben Pollard, and from there you had an interesting route to kind of get to your current position. Kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the origins of it started when I was at Arkansas as a GA, and I was working with track and field. And I just was really it was really opportunistic. I got to work with some elite track and field athletes. I started working pro track circuits. I started traveling the world, especially with Veronica Campbell-Brown. And I got to go to some world championships. And I started seeing there were some different models out there for how performance was managed. And what was really intriguing to me is in track and field, you can control the entire training process. The technical, tactical, the physical training in the weight room, the recovery. And I felt kind of frustrated as a strength coach that all we could handle was our little domain. And sometimes we know that the biggest adaptations take place on the field.
Right.
With coaches in practice. And so when I went to Florida State, I started as the speed coach and nutritionist. And I had an opportunity to go to Australia, and I was invited by the Sydney Giants to do some consulting on speed development, and then do a performance summit at the Institute of Sport with my friend Joe Danos, who's now with the Giants. And we were exposed to a lot of really cool stuff that I'd read about. And then I saw the GPS tracking, and
right.
I came back to Coach Fisher. I said, hey, Coach, there's some really cool stuff that Joe and I were exposed to. We think this could be of use. Right around that time, our director of football operations retired, and I started getting wind that I was going to be the new ops guy. So I just said, hey, Coach, if that's what you want me to do, you know how it is, I'll do it. I just want to be named Director of Football Ops and Director of Sports Science. And he was like, you can call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. And I love Coach Fisher. He's a funny guy. And he didn't know at the time kind of what I was planning. So when we came back, we did a little presentation for him. And I said, hey, I think this tracking stuff could really give you a lot of power as a head coach. And I think the sports science stuff is going to be the next step. And he stepped out on a ledge and gave me an opportunity to do some neat stuff. And that's kind of where it started.
So I mean, obviously you said with the track, traveling around the track and seeing it a different way. And I mean, we talked a little bit off camera about this, with myself being over in NFL Europe and then adopting our kids from overseas. And I can't stress enough the importance as a strength coach or anybody that's listening to get outside of our country or whatever country that is, just to be exposed to different cultures and different ways of doing things. And what it does is it really opens your mind to more of a global approach, to things. And so I know that was part of it, but this motivation, like you said, it was something that you saw differently. You saw it maybe a different way. You had to come back. You had to sell it to Coach Fisher and anybody else that would listen. Really, what was the motivation? I mean, did you have this kind of high-performance director in mind the whole time, or was it something that was like, I'm going to try to see what I can do and try to change things as I can?
Well, I'll tell you what, it was kind of the epiphany moment. I'm with the Sydney Giants, and they had a staff meeting in the morning. And it was the high-performance director of sports medicine, their team doctor, sports scientist, and strength conditioning coach. And they went to the roster and talked about the health and wellness of the players. And then they went to the coach, and they said, Coach, here's how much work you can do this day. Now, do whatever you want, but here's...
Yeah.
And the cool thing I thought was two things. One is everybody sat at a table and discussed without ego.
Right.
And then two, the coaches they're brilliant at what they do. They are technical, tactical PhDs, right?
Right.
They have jobs for a reason. But sometimes they don't understand the physiological cost of training on the field. And so they were able to guide the coaches. Coaches are still doing what they do best, but they just provide parameters. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to help all these areas work together. And so, when I saw that, I heard about the high-performance manager role. My buddy John Quinn, who was one of the first in Australia, really kind of mentored me through how to put it together. So I came back, and that was kind of my mindset. When Coach Stoops was offered before he was even offered the UK job, we put together a plan for UK football, and a lot of it was based on these high-performance principles. So, he said, all right, Eric, I'll let you be the first high-performance coach. So he bought in, and he's a blue-collar guy.
Right.
I mean, he's a blue-collar guy, but he saw the benefit. And we want to have a tenacious defense. We wanted to be fresh, and we wanted to play fast. And we were able to help our players stay healthy and perform at their best. And so for him, I think it was a no-brainer.
Well, I mean, that brings up a great point, and that's probably, where a lot of strength coaches sit on the fence right now. They wonder, with all this technology, with GPS and HRV and Omega Wave and on and on and on, are we becoming too soft? In the sports science kind of, are we letting this dictate our training too much? And you go to like a Coach Stoops, who's obviously a football family and been around it and probably did it, the Junction Boyle style way back when. How do you get somebody to buy in that's blue collar like that to buy in? But then also, I think we would both agree that when guys are going around the track, what happens is that we sit there as coaches and we scream at the guy that's coming across last. And the fact of the matter is, he's probably working as hard as he possibly can, versus the guy that's coming across first, and really being able to define what they're capable of doing. So, I mean, I know there's a way that we can do this in a way that it's going to make people work harder. But, when you hear people talk about using science and it making us softer, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think number one, first thing, it's not about technology, it's about information.
Absolutely.
You have to have a global understanding of the training process. We think training process is weights. The training process is automation of motor skill, developing biological power, all those sorts of things. Number two, sports science doesn't make you soft. As a matter of fact, it can help us push our guys harder than they ever thought was possible, and it develops confidence in our players.
Absolutely.
And also, we can rank them. We have certain things what we do in the summer training, and Coach Ed will look, all right, we had X planned, and this is how many high-intensity efforts this guy gave, and we'll call them out. You're dogging it. And we have proof of it.
Right.
And the other part, too, is sometimes, we've all had the situation where the kid trains hard, does everything right, doesn't gain weight, doesn't get any stronger. Why? Everything is stress. Academic stress. Food is stress. Training is stress. Social.
Right.
So what we try to do is identify what is preventing that kid from reaching his potential. And once we can get that barrier out of the way, it's amazing what happens. And then we can push them harder. And we want our athletes to be self-aware. Great world-class athletes, the best in the world, are extremely self-aware.
Right.
They know and how their body's feeling. Is it ticking right? How to ramp it up? How to have emotional control? So this sports science isn't just a bunch of dorks behind the door, making their pie charts. It's just providing structure and helping everybody in the organization to help our players be the absolute best.
Absolutely. Well, we talk about this on the show quite a bit about the higher the level of sport, the more informed the consumer is, and the more ideas they have based off of what they feel works for them, and when you can support that with quantitative data instead of qualitative data, I mean, it's huge, because it's like you said. I mean, there's no hiding from that.
Right. And also, I'll tell you this, there's certain times where, people would be surprised where we just throw science out the window and the only adaptation is mental.
Right.
And we pick those days out, though. It's not like every day is just a complete grind and chew them out and spit them out on the other side. We pick and choose it's all strategic. So the kids come in, we're like, we're going to push you to your absolute limit today. But we know what the cost is on the back end, and we know how to get them back into where we want them to go.
No doubt. Well, it's a great question, and that, when you come across, when the data is pointing the wrong direction, and as a scientist, the scientist in you versus maybe the coach in you, when somebody comes in with with an HRV that's not what it's supposed to be, or they're just not responding recovery wise the way they're supposed to be. You can't just all of a sudden say, well, we're not practicing today, or we're not going to lift today. Obviously you can make some adjustments, but we all know that specifically college kids, they're not always going to live right those other 22 hours outside of the day, So when you get this information, obviously there's an educational process that you're going through with your athletes. What are some of the things you guys do educationally to say, hey, look, we're not going to stop what we're doing. It's your job to fix the other 22 hours.
Right. So I'll give you two things. Number one, we educate the players on what we're doing, because they have to see the information. Because if they don't see the information, then they'll blow it off.
Right.
If a kid comes in and we see something that's off, we actually have a traffic light system we developed for us in-house, where if we see things are a certain way, man, we're going to push them harder than we planned today. If we see something's off, we may take an auxiliary lift out, or we may go to one of their limiting factors. Maybe it's mobility or something. But sometimes we'll see trends. 5, 6, 7 days in a row, kids drop off. That's when we start getting concerned.
Right.
We've been able to intervene. We found kids with sleep issues where they weren't gaining weight. They were having injuries because the kid couldn't sleep at night. Kid stressed out about something in his personal life that we were able to intervene in because we saw it on our data. And then all of a sudden, boom, he takes off and he's killing it. Mm-hmm. But, there's some days I'm like, screw it. As long as we don't think we're putting a kid at risk, hey, he's a little bit on the red line. Well, guess what? You're not going to feel great in season.
Right.
If you're a 7 out of 10 in season, we're rocking.
No doubt.
So you got it. Some of it's by feel, and you got to be smart. But I will tell you this: sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is tell a kid, "You're not doing what everybody else is doing." Why? Because I can tell your habits haven't been good, and if you get under the bar and you blow your back out, who's the idiot now?
Right.
And then they're like, the tough guy comes out, and they're like, man, I guess it really was stupid to go out 2 nights in a row.
Right.
Sometimes you can flip it on them.
Absolutely. Well, again, that just goes back to educating them that they have responsibility. It's a two-way street,
right.
And they got a responsibility back.
They made a commitment to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, right. And their teammates, more importantly.
Yeah,
that's when you use that pure and you got that traffic light system posted and everybody's in the green except for the one guy that's in the red. It's easy to point that guy out and use that pure pressure in a positive way.
Absolutely.
What about So you've been very fortunate. Arkansas and Mississippi State and Florida State and Kentucky, and there's places that that have money and resources. What if you're at Kentucky Technical College and you're trying to do something similar to this? How do you find the money? How do you do things in a way to where you can do similar type of processes, use science to help drive training?
I started my first full-time job was Fort Valley State.
Yep.
Division II HBCU, and then I went to University of the Pacific. I think it was $9 million athletic department budget. Not very good.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff you can do with pen and paper.
Yep.
RPEs, monotony strain, wellness questionnaires, jump tests. Those type of things are very, very simple and cost effective. You can find $800 for a couple switch mats. You can create something on Google Docs that the kids can fill out for free. Mm-hmm. And then what it is it's learning how to automate it and how to get everybody to buy in. You could guide training with your coaches and come up with means of monitoring practice I've actually made, when we first got here, UK didn't have the GPS stuff yet, right? So I went through and I met with the offense and defensive coordinator. I said, all right, every single drill that you think you're going to run, we're going to classify that drill on intensity, contact, speed, work-rest ratio, blah, blah. And I created scales on practices, and then we were able to fit practice together based off of their perception of what it was going to be. Was it perfect? No, but was it better than nothing?
Right.
No, and after a couple of weeks, I got the GPS in, and I could create that stuff. So a lot of it is just limited by what's up here. You know, I would strongly suggest when people look at Carl Foster's work in Monotony and Strain, Hooper's work and wellness questionnaires. You can make a custom wellness questionnaire and put it on Google Docs, and it costs nothing.
Right.
And you can get some powerful, because kids sometimes won't tell you what's wrong. They'll text you, or they'll put it on a wellness questionnaire.
Right.
But they won't tell you to your face. And we've caught so many things because kids will communicate that way.
Oh, that's great. What about now when you're getting all these different sources? You talk about automating this process. You know, you got all these different sources of information. You know, you can't. You know, I mean, these coaches, they're bombarded with recruiting and all the things that they got going on. I mean, you got to simplify this in a way that makes it easy for them to digest.
Right.
And also in a way that's like, you know, it's got the most bang for its buck. You know, so. You know, kind of using both. Again, the resources, I know you can use like Coach Me Plus and things like this to kind of create a little dashboard. But, you know, what about if it's not, you know, you don't have the resources?
Number one, be brief, be bright, be gone. That's kind of my rule, you know, especially when the higher up you go and with information, one side of one piece of paper with bullet points. And know if your coach is a graph guy or he just likes bullet points.
Right.
I try to give them what's pieces of information that we call actionable intelligence that they can actually make a decision off of. I don't need to show him or, you know, our offensive coordinator trends with high-intensity sprints. He doesn't care about that. He wants to know, can we push more? Can we back off? And so I try to pick out something very simple. He can look at it, make a decision, move on. Color coding things is really good for coaches. You know, your starting quarterbacks are red. Oh, why is he red? Well, let's talk about that.
Right.
So I try to make things really, really simple. And I'll tell you what, with all this stuff we can do with Excel now, if you're on a campus, a college campus, you can go to your IT department. If you have a GA that's getting a master's or a PhD, they'll make a database for that kid for free. And then you could, as long as they're doing some research, is that you're going to find people on campus that are interested in this stuff and that just want to come over and help. I'd reach out to professors. I'd reach out to IT department, the mathematics, the stats department. People, you're going to find people that just, athletics, that's cool. I'm going to give them some clothes.
No doubt. Do that all the time.
Yeah.
You know, with going back kind of to the early stages. I mean, obviously you're well read now, and you've done a lot of research in this area, and you're kind of crafting together your system. But early on, it was like this was all foreign to you. I'm sure, you know.
Completely.
Talk about kind of going back to the young coach that's listening. That's like, man, I don't know a thing about what HRV and what are you talking about? You know, where do you start? You know, and kind of how do you go about digesting this, and then getting to a point to where it's like I'm sitting at University of Kentucky running this high performance program.
I'll never forget the first time I heard James Smith do a DVD.
Makes you feel dumb, don't he?
Oh man, I'll tell you what, my brain, the thinker, man, I was hurting. My brain, I didn't know what he just said.
That's right.
And so I went back to the roots. You know, a lot of this stuff started Eastern Bloc literature. You can look at things like, Yuri Verkhoshansky, Vladimir Zatorsky. Those type of, first thing I would say is this: understand stress. Learn, basic stress adaptation models. Start with general adaptation. Move to something called functional systems theory. I would read about that, because the more you can understand how stress affects the human body, the more things, it's almost like the Matrix. All of a sudden you're like, oh, geez, all the numbers are starting to fall now. It makes a little more sense. Track and field has been doing this for a very long time. guy like Dan Paff, I'd read as much as I could about what Dan's doing. Going back to even Gerard Mock and Charlie Francis.
Yeah.
And then as far as modern day stuff, I would just, there's a High Performance for Sport. I think there's a book called High Performance.
Yeah, David Joyce was on the show. Yeah, good book.
Yeah, he's now at GWS.
Yeah. With Nick.
I would start with something like that. It's very global. That first chapter in that book where it looks at creating player development models, limiting factors. That's what we're working on right now. Right. But I would just say start simple. Okay, in the next 2 months, I'm going to master how to do an RPE. Okay, then I'm going to learn how to do monotony and strain. And then I'm going to go learn about this HRV thing. What is that? Just take it slowly.
Right.
Don't try to open your mouth and fire hose that thing. Take it. It's just like when you first started strength conditioning coach. All right, how in the world do I do a power clean? How do I do a squat? Okay, now how do I periodize?
Right.
Oh, now you get a little bit better at just straight linear periodization. Maybe I'm going to try some undulating periodization. So I think where people get really discouraged is they think that they have to know all of this stuff at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Get good at one thing, become deadly at it, and then add another layer. And then get really good at that, make sure it's usable and people are able to understand it in your whole department, and add another layer,
Right. No, great point. That's exactly how I learned going back way back when. Was I would take I'd get all these strength and conditioning manuals in, and I would have my nutrition section and my speed section and my strength section, and as I got more and more in, I'd start to kind of write what I thought,
Right.
and then everything I read, I would defend against what I had put together, and I couldn't agree more with you. What about, so you made this shift now, kind of this model that's, it's kind of, it's probably to some degree you feel like all the eyes are on you, like this model's got to work type of thing, but where do you see the field going? Because it's not just in Kentucky now. I mean, a lot of professional organizations are kind of going to more of a high performance model as well, and obviously the Olympic sport countries, most of them have done this. Where do you see like collegiate sport going specifically to kind of blend this and to make it so that there's a, I've spoken at the CSCCA conference a couple times about, not really seeing where our aging strength coaches are going, and so where do you see the future of strength and conditioning going with this?
Well, and I don't want to sound doom and gloom, so you got to understand this. I think strength conditioning is going to become another piece of the wheel.
Yep.
So just like nutrition, just like sports medicine, because that's all it is. It's a part of the training process. If you overvalue practice, you don't develop the physical part, good luck.
Right.
If you overvalue strength training and you don't practice enough, good luck. So if I was a strength coach, first of all, I think this is going to, in the next 10 years, you're probably going to start seeing performance managers popping up at these universities. My number one concern is that here we don't have curriculums in the U.S. for it. So we're actually working on a curriculum here at UK right now. I'm working on my PhD, and they're trying to use the track that they've developed for me as the high-performance PhD. I would strongly suggest getting a PhD. Biomechanics, sports medicine, something a little bit different. Because you don't have to be a strength coach to get this job. You could be a sports psychologist.
Right.
You could be a head athletic trainer that has a background in strength conditioning and sports medicine and a couple other pieces. I would strongly suggest getting out of your comfort zone, stop being so myopic, and be willing to, reach. You got to reach across the board.
Yep.
And really start developing those interpersonal skills to go, hey, you know what? I don't know the answer, and maybe you have the answer. I think that ability to develop teams is going to be a big part of this, but I see it happening, and whether people like it or not, it's going to happen.
Right.
Because it makes too much sense. It just makes too much sense. Anybody that I've introduced this to, they sit back and they go, well, that makes a lot of sense. You have your CEO of your organization, you got your HR division, you got your sales division. Well, why don't we do that in sports?
Mm-hmm. Because
everybody wants to protect their area.
That's right.
And I think it's going to take a lot of people being unselfish, and you can't sit in this chair and want to have power. Power is not what this is about. It's about facilitating And my biggest goal is this. I want to hire the most talented people possible. Give them room and let them work.
Yep.
And that's when magic happens. But you got to have everybody pulling in the same direction. And obviously, UK, we start winning here, it turns more heads.
Sure.
So, no doubt. But do I feel pressure that, not really.
Right.
I mean, there's greater things in life.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
And so, yeah.
Well, the great thing about that is strength coaches that are listening specifically is that in a lot of those Olympic sport countries, the high performance manager was a former strength coach because the reason being is the number one factor in that is that the coach's ear and the respect of the team. And there's not necessarily a position that has both of those things like the strength coach. And so there's a bright future if we embrace that, I believe.
Yeah, we got to educate ourselves. We got to step out. I would say let's say you're an aging strength coach, this is something I'm interested in. I would start taking some classes in sports medicine at the graduate level. I'd take some classes in sports psychology. Go to the business school, take some classes.
Yep.
Biochemistry, because you're going to have to be able to speak a bunch of different languages. You're going to have to interact with a bunch of different people. Not that you need to be an expert like them, but you need to be able to understand what they're saying, put it together, and have a nice plan. And if you do that, I think, I think it's going to be a really big success.
No, I agree 100% with you. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, brother, we finished these shows with some resources here. So, what's the best piece of coaching advice you've ever received?
I'm going to give you two. One is don't get good at the wrong things. And what I mean by that is like, and this is, don't spend your whole life at work when you have a family and a wife and kids.
Absolutely.
Because your legacy is there. And that, for me, it's God, it's my family, and then it's my occupation.
Yep.
Because the last thing I want to do is just have a bunch of trophies and nobody to spend the rest of my life with.
No doubt.
So don't get good at the wrong things. Number two, my assistant, Tony Sandoval, has a saying. It says, you can't learn to punish your opponent until you learn to punish yourself. And I think that's so true in anything. You have to be disciplined and you have to be willing. There's a verse in the Bible that says, I beat my body and I make it my slave. As an athlete, you have to be able to beat yourself before you can beat your opponent. So,
no, that's a great one. That's great. What about, you gave us a quote there, but do you have another quote that you use either just for your own personal use or one that you use plastered up there in the weight room somewhere?
Yeah, we do not rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. And for me, that's what it's all about because, a lot of guys expect to do well. Like, for instance, we just had a great athlete, Bud Dupree, who trained here for his combine, okay? He did some remarkable things. I've never seen a 270-pound athlete brought 11.6 in my life.
Wow.
But he PR'd by a foot. How did he get to that point? Because he trained that way. Every day for him was the combine. And the great athletes train at such a high level that when they show up on the field, it's like business as usual. And so, that is in the high performance in the weight room, and that is huge letters across the wall.
No, it's a great one.
You want to perform well, you got to train at a high level.
No doubt. What about maybe a book inside strength and conditioning and one outside of strength and conditioning?
One inside. I love Verkhoshansky's second book on special training. It talks about functional systems in there. The first 100 pages is great. I also would say Buddy Morris and Ryan Williams' book, Physical Preparation for American Football. The first 100 pages of that is exactly what I give my interns.
Yeah.
Like I had this intern Dropbox, and then they put that thing out and like, oh crap, now it's there. Great. Now I can just tell them to go buy that. And then there's another book called Legacy.
Yep.
It's about the All Blacks rugby team. I think that's the best team leadership book I've ever read in my life.
Yeah, that's a great one. What about an app that you guys use, maybe with your athletes, or one that you use for your own productivity?
Omega Wave.
Yeah.
That's our key. That's probably our number one internal load monitor, and I use it myself on me. And it's really weird when I go back and look at the year and I see where my stress index was the highest. season, okay?
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
And when we start using that, and the players really get good at it, and they start understanding stress models, it does some pretty neat stuff for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. What about a website that you generally check out, or one that you recommend?
I'll be honest, I really don't have a website that I mean, I read Football Scoop, just like everybody else. Yeah. Really, I think the best information I get is talking to friends. And, really, Twitter, I'll just say this, Twitter, it can be a gigantic waste of time, or if you follow the right people or organizations, you can stay ahead of the literature. I mean, as soon as it comes out, you're getting it.
Great.
Dave Tenney, Mark McLaughlin, Landon Evans, Jay DeMayo, people I know, they're always posting stuff. I'm like, man, that's great. I want to read that. So that's my way of staying current.
No, I do the same thing. It's a fantastic way. No, that's great, man. Well, brother, on the show, I try to bring people on that are doing, that are innovators, that are guys that are doing things in a little bit different way, man. And you're totally doing that and doing a fantastic job. And really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and spending it with everybody and sharing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, man. Have a great day.
You too.
That's it for this episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk. Thanks to this week's guest as well as our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com, where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about Coach McKeefery's other products. While you are there, please join Coach McKeefery in the comments section thanking our guest for sharing. If you haven't subscribed to Iron Game Chalk Talk on YouTube or iTunes yet, make sure to do so. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome. Coach McKeefery can be found on Twitter at @RMcKeefery, on Facebook and YouTube at /Ron.McKeefery. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk.